I thought the hardest part was carving the turkey. The noise, the jokes, the knife against bone, making sure my mother's critique didn't land in front of my father-in-law. It turned out the hardest part was watching my wife's nephew smear gravy on his chin and blurt, "Auntie slept in the living room," while my brother-in-law stared at the table like he could fall through it if he didn't blink. That one sentence hit the dining room like a power outage. Forks froze, chairs creaked. My mother said, "Oh," in the tone she uses when she opens an onion that has already decided to rot. I'm an assembly line engineer in suburban Columbus, 38. The kind of guy who knows the sound a bearing makes when it's lying about having another month in it. My wife is Emma, 35, PTA everything. The person schools call when they want snacks to appear and a stage to be painted by Tuesday. Her brother, Marco, is always around, a magnet for second chances and a man for whom couches become beds with suspicious speed. The nephew with the gravy is Oliver, 5, a talker with no breaks, technically Emma's sister Lena's kid, which means at gatherings he travels between adults like an urgent memo. We do Thanksgiving at our place because our dining table has leaves and because my mother says my oven keeps its promises. Around 1, we were all eating the second round, the post-politeness round, when Oliver, mouth glossy, announced to the table what he had learned at 6 a.m. Auntie slept in the living room. He chopped the word slept into pieces, delighted with his own delivery. He added, for emphasis, on the big couch, and I saw Marco take a long drink without looking up. He's got those gentle eyes that make women call him a good listener and men call him a problem. Emma laughed too bright. "Because of the pie," she said. "I burned the pie and stayed up with the windows open, and then I just dozed." She put her hand on Oliver's head and steered the conversation toward crafts like a seasoned pilot finding an alternate runway. My mother stabbed a green bean. My father cleared his throat for no reason. Lena flashed me a quick look that said, "You'll talk about this later," and then handed Oliver a napkin he did not use. I told myself I was being dramatic. People sleep on couches, marriages get indigestion over holidays, nephews narrate what should not be narrated. Still, something got up and walked around inside my chest. The rest of the afternoon wore the costume of normal. We took the group photo with half-shut eyes, we ate too much pie, we packed leftovers with the efficiency of a relief operation. People left in flurries of hugs. The house exhaled. I carried the trash to the garage and saw a knit cap on the workbench. A man's cap, not mine. Navy blue with a thin strip of grease on the edge like someone set it down right where a socket wrench had slept. I picked it up. It smelled like old aftershave in the backseat of a car that gets used to smoking and then sold to someone who swears they'll stop. Emma came into the doorway with a plastic tub for the extra chairs. "Is that yours?" she asked with a face so neutral it felt like a decision. "No," I said. "Marco?" she offered like we were finding a sock and not an answer. "Maybe," I said, and put the cap on the shelf next to paint that will never be used. The kids, Lily and Noah, wanted a movie. I made popcorn and the house dimmed into that post-holiday quiet where you can hear your own footsteps from the kitchen to the couch. Once they were asleep, I cleaned a counter that didn't need it. Emma's purse sat on the chair under the window, open because she never closes it, confident in the universe or our zip code or both. I picked it up to move it and felt the hard corner of paper. I didn't mean to look. That is the kind of sentence men say when they are already looking. It was a late-night receipt from a catering company 2 towns over, time-stamped 12,043 a.m., wine and a charcuterie spread that could pay for a tire. The name on the order line was Marco's. The signature at the bottom was Emma's, her looped E like the way she draws hearts for the kids' lunch notes. I rubbed my thumbnail over the ink and felt the indentations where someone pressed too hard. On the receipt, under event, someone had written simply, "Back porch." The next morning, my mother came by to pick up the kids for a movie and left with more than she came for. It took her 6 minutes to say what she'd held in for 24 hours. She stood in our kitchen, hand flattening a dish towel into a perfect rectangle and said, "Son, he stayed here last night." She didn't need to say a name. I got up for water, and I saw a shadow through the glass. 2 mugs on the counter, lights low. You were asleep. Emma was on the couch. She was here. "You could have woken me," I said. "You're a grown man." That's my mother's way of saying, the world is not a surprise, and she's tired of pretending it is. She kissed Lily's hair, told Noah to wear a coat, and walked out with their hands in hers, like she was saving all of us from the storm except me. I waited until afternoon to drive to Marco's apartment because anger is a time traveler, and I didn't want it arriving before I did. He lives in a complex built when optimism was brown brick and good parking. I knocked. He opened the door like he'd been expecting a package. He wore a t-shirt from a band he says he used to follow and a face that had slept late. The apartment smelled like burnt toast and cologne from a drugstore aisle. "We were drunk," he said before I finished my first word. He looked past me down the hall like the weird, polite neighbor might witness this and ask for the story later. It happened. We were drunk. My anger was not the act. My anger was the choice of him. The betrayal had a logic that made it rotten. Emma could have picked any nameless man from the blur of a bar. She picked the person whose presence has always arrived with the sentence, "It's family, what can we do?" She picked the one person who can be in my house in the dark without anyone tripping an alarm. I stepped past them into the living room and put my hands on the back of the couch because I didn't trust them to behave if I let them go solo. You came into my house, I said. You fed her wine in my kitchen. She poured it, he said, palms open like a bank robber, explaining the policy. We were both there. Is that better? I asked. He shrugged, the shrug of a man who believes that if he acknowledges responsibility and calls it equal, the room will move on. We're adults, he said. We made a mistake. You made a choice, I said. A dozen choices, probably, starting with the text and ending with your car in my driveway while my kids' pictures hang on the wall. He took a breath like someone about to tell the truth finally, and then he said nothing. His phone lit on the counter with a Venmo notification, a little blue bar sliding down the screen. I shouldn't have looked. I did. The name said Emma T. The memo line read Advance, 3 sparks. The amount would cover a month of someone else's rent. When I got home, the house knew something had shifted. The air felt like after lightning. Emma stood at the sink, rinsing a mug that was already clean, the way people do when a plant arrives and hands them something to hold until it takes shape. You want to talk? I asked. I want you to listen, she said, and then I want you not to destroy our family. I want the truth, I said. The truth is not a courtroom, Alex, she said, and I noticed she used my full name, which she only does when she's giving me a speech about what kind of husband I'm going to be next. It can be paper, I said. Let's make it paper. We saw a lawyer 2 days later. The office smelled like copies and furniture polish and the dust of other people's endings. The lawyer, a woman with 2 first names and a stare that could categorize a hurricane, let us sit across from each other with a legal pad in between, like a chessboard. Emma wore a sweater I bought her last winter, the one with the sleeves that swallowed her hands, and stared at a spot on the carpet as if the answer to everything came stitched in. I don't want to blow this up, Emma said first before the lawyer asked a question. I messed up. We messed up. It was one night. He needed help, and I... What did you give him? I asked. She closed her eyes for a count of 2. Money. A bridge. He was behind on rent. He was applying for a new job. He said he needed to show a bank statement with stability. How much? She told me a number that could buy a used car that doesn't embarrass you in a parking lot. From where? I asked. Please don't, she began. From where? I said, and the lawyer made a tiny note I wanted to crumple with my fist. From us, she said. From the college fund. It's our money. It's for our kids. Whose signature is on the withdrawal? The lawyer asked. Mine, Emma said. He needed it fast. The paperwork needed a parrot. It's all in the same household. I'll put it back. When? I asked. As soon as he gets paid, she said. As soon as my bonus hits, as soon as I sell the minivan and get a cheaper one, as soon as you stop making this. This what? I asked. Real? The lawyer slid a tissue box like we were playing shuffleboard with grief. She said words like equitable and parenting plan and assets and liabilities and temporary orders. Emma tried to reach across the table with her eyes. I stuck my hands in my pockets so they wouldn't shake. The day the college fund statement arrived, the paper cut my thumb. It was a 529 plan we set up when Lily was born, the kind of thing you do when you believe in future versions of yourselves. The withdrawal line had Emma's neat name next to a date that made my stomach go hollow. Our neighbor, Mrs. King, who sees everything because she waters her front lawn like it's the board of directors, texted me a photo from her phone. Marco's car in our driveway at 2 a.m. You might want to know, she wrote, as if I might not. I started a folder because evidence is how I breathe when feelings clog the vents. I put in the catering receipt from the purse, the 529 withdrawal paperwork with Emma's signature, the Venmo screenshots, a printout of the bank transfer, and a note with the date Oliver told the truth without knowing it. I added a copy of our Ring camera log where a shadow crossed the field at 12:12 and the door opened without the chime because family doesn't need keys the way strangers do. At dinner, I made spaghetti because it's the dish you make when you can't think. The kids ate like they were on a deadline. Emma sat at the table with her hands around a glass of water like it was the only thing still cold in the room. In front of the kids, she said, voice soft and hoarse, I'm gonna say the words and you're gonna not break everything with your face. We're in the kitchen, I said. My face isn't that strong. Lily looked up like a rabbit. Noah kept whining spaghetti until it slid off his fork in a loop scarf. Mom messed up, Emma said, and there it was, the sentence lodged like a shard in the throat of this house. Mom made a mistake and used money that wasn't for today. Mom is going to fix it. Lily kept her eyes on the table and said, Does that mean I can't go to Ohio State? You don't forget a question like that, even if the answer is 10 years away. Noah asked if mistakes get grounded. Emma's mouth fought itself. After the kids went to bed, she packed a bag. It was not dramatic, it was a soft exhale. She put in 3 sweaters and the stuffed rabbit she got when she was a kid that somehow ended up in our closet. She went to Lena's because sisters sometimes absorb shock because brothers create it. The door closed like a file drawer. The house made itself small. The PTA called the next day with a contingency plan for us, which really meant for me. Given the attention, the officer said, voice syruped with concern, it might be best if you step back from volunteering this season. She didn't say the words scandal or gossip or the name of the man who parks in our driveway when the lights are off. She did say the phrase for the kids 3 times, which I have learned is the incantation that allows adults to punish each other in public without saying so. The plan with the lawyer moved forward like a conveyor belt you can't step off without falling. We scheduled the financial mediation. We split the furniture in columns, the couch going with her because it held her shape better. The mortgage turned into math. Equity turned into a word that meant less than it should because my paycheck comes with a number that cares more about hours than heartbreak. The college funds became a battlefield map. We placed freezes. We set up alerts that pinged my phone whenever the account looked at a withdrawal. I started getting texts from a number I didn't know, then realized it was the same number Emma used to reset passwords. The bank spot telling me the wall still stood. Marco texted me exactly once after that. It read, "I'm sorry, I'll fix it." I stared at the screen long enough to watch the letters lose shape. I didn't respond. What response does revenge merit when it is stupid instead of strategic? What sentence balances a ledger that got ripped out of my hand and used as kindling? The house felt big without Emma's battles. I slept on my side of the bed like the other half had rights. I made lunches too heavy with fruit like vitamins could inoculate against gossip. I checked the porch 2 extra times at night, not because I was scared, but because a door lock becomes a prayer when secrets steal your sleep. The garage held that knit cap like a punchline I was too tired to laugh at. Sometimes I stood under the single bulb and looked at it in its place on the shelf, the exact midpoint between a life with more furniture and a life with more breath. It would be tidy to tell you how we ended. Life isn't tidy. It's a workbench you keep meaning to organize. There were days when Emma would text an apology, and I would type long answers inside my head, then build a small boat and push them down the river instead of sending. There were nights when she would call and the line would be a geography lesson, the distance between two rooms in the same town. There were afternoons when Lily would ask a question I couldn't make smaller, and I would give her a version I could survive. We stood in our kitchen one last time when the lawyer finally produced the stack with all the signatures. No turkey, no smell of cloves, no gathering to pretend for. Just a countertop, a bottle of water, and two pins that had performed similar duties for dozens of other couples who once bought a table with leaves for the future. Emma picked up the cap from the garage where I had placed it on the counter like an exhibit. She held it a second and said, "I threw up when he left that night." It wasn't a plea, it was a data point. She set the cap down, aligned it with the edge of the granite the way she aligns the kids' homework so their names sit straight in the corner. "I didn't want to tell you like this," she said, the understatement of a landmine. "I was going to move the money back and tell you it had been a bank hiccup. I was going to frame it as something you could roll your eyes at. I was going to say we made a mistake as a family and we would fix it as a family." Then Oliver said the thing he said at the table. And after that, I couldn't manufacture a version that didn't offend God. "You could have not done it," I said. "I could have not done it," she said. "I did it. I can make it smaller only by paying it back." "That would be a start," I said, and both of us heard how soft that sounded against the hard wall. She moved in with Lena. I kept the house because the kids' bedrooms already knew their names. We put a freeze on the college accounts and created new ones and wrote it down like a vow. I sold the camping gear I pretended I'd use next summer. I switched our internet provider because starting over sometimes looks like a different router name you don't have to type her birthday into. I told Mrs. King she could stop being my neighborhood surveillance. She winked and watered her lawn. At work, a bearing screamed on line 2. I walked across the floor and listened to it like a priest takes confession. "You're not dying," I told the kid operating the machine. "You're lying." We pulled the housing, we replaced the part, we got the rhythm back. It felt like theft to be good at fixing someone else's noise when my house had been a symphony of things unsaid. I kept the folder, I still have it. Sometimes I add a note when I find a new small truth. Emma's email asking the 529 company to expedite processing. Marco's car registered to a different address than the one he texted from. The neighbor 2 doors down telling me, in the tone of someone who wants credit for bravery, that she saw Marco's taillights at 1:30 and thought about calling someone, anyone, then decided it wasn't her business. The Venmo history where Emma begins writing real memos after the exposure. Childcare, groceries, false flags to cover a pattern already mapped. If I had to build a moral out of this, I'd use cheap lumber and honest nails. Love is not an exemption from math. Charity begins at home, yes, but so do boundaries. The people closest to you are the only ones who can enter your kitchen without knocking. That is a gift and a weapon. And money is never about money. It's the story you tell about what you value when you're tired. Once, a month after the documents, Lily came home with a flyer about a college fair and set it on the counter like a dare. She looked at me and I looked at her and I said the sentence I could say without choking: "We will have what you need when you need it." It is a promise and a plan and a bearing that will scream if it thinks I'm lying. Truth be told, I want it to. Would you have confronted him at the table or swallowed it for the kids until the paper proof stacked up? If your spouse borrowed from the college fund and called it in advance, would you freeze the accounts and fight, or try to believe the money and the trust could both be replaced? If you want more stories like this, stick around and hit like and subscribe.